Hi, Dan Tokar here at the Willow Forge in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, with another Blacksmiths dictionary entry for something that blacksmiths made in the old days that almost nobody associates with blacksmiths, and that's ink. What started this off today was that the walnuts are beginning to fall off the tree near the shop, and I collected up a half a bucket full of new walnuts. And this is something I do every year. I get a couple of buckets full of walnuts or walnut husks, what the squirrels don't want. And the reason I collect them is that the husks have an awful lot of tannic acid. And in the old days, one way to make ink would be to take walnuts, cover them with water. You want enough water to actually cover the walnuts. And then you put this someplace for about a month and let it ferment. And after about a month, what you end up with is a brown soup with lots of bits and pieces of walnut husk in it. And you strain it through something like window screen to get most of the solids out of it. And this is one of the jugs that I put up last year because it's very useful stuff for other things besides making ink. I might have a video about those, but basically what it looks like once you filter it is a dark brown liquid. Just like that. All right, so how do we turn this into ink, and why don't we just use this dark brown liquid the way it is? Because it's the stuff that turns your fingers brown. If you've ever husked walnuts and had your hands turn brown, it's the tannins, the tannic acid in the walnut husk that does that. And it takes a long time to get it out of your skin. I mean, you could have brown fingers for weeks. So why don't we just use that for ink? Well, the problem is the tannic acid is just that. It's a mild organic acid. So if you filled up your pen or used your quill and used just plain walnut water, tannic acid, for ink, you would have a very pale brown ink that has enough acid in it that it actually burns the paper. That after a number of years, I have actually seen old documents that didn't have enough, hadn't been de-acidified, that were actually burned where the ink had touched them. So if you ever see that, it's because it's poorly made ink. So if you want to turn the brown acid into a black ink, what do you add? Well, like I said, blacksmiths have all sorts of interesting things in the shop that you wouldn't normally think of as being a resource. And one of them is scale. The black iron oxide that you have pop off as you're forging is what you add to the walnut water to make ink. So what I want to do is a little housekeeping. I'm going to take my dustpan and take the scale that's come off the trip hammer, that scale, and I'm going to put it into this coffee can, and I'm going to wash it to get the little bits of coal and coke and other dirt out of it, and flux and just regular floor sweepings. So, can full of just regular scale. pour in some water. Stir it up. This also helps to break the potato chips, the bigger chips of scale. If you break them up into finer pieces with your fingers while you're washing it, that's a help. So you probably see that all of the little bits of Coke float to the top. So I can just strain those out with my fingers. Get rid of all the little bits of debris, the floor sweepings, the dirt, all of that stuff. Because what we want is nice, clean scale. Okay, and I am going to pour that water off. This is just a waste bucket. And now I've got nice clean scale. I'm going to add some of the walnut water that I made last year. And I'm only going to fill the container about half full, and then I'm going to put it on the forge. Alright, you want to use a metal can, like an old coffee can, to do this, because galvanized or plastic, well, glass. Plastic is what you want when you're fermenting the walnuts, because you don't want the acid to react with a metal bucket. Glass would be okay, but, well, I'm not sure that you want to use your good Pyrex cooking pots and things to make ink. So all I'm doing is I'm bringing this up to a boil. That'll make the tannic acid react with the iron scale, the iron oxide, and it'll also remove some of the water, because the other thing is that it's way too thin. You need to reduce it down a little bit, as well as react it. A low simmering boil for maybe 20 minutes, something like that. As much fun as it would be to watch it boil for 20 minutes, I have this little cup, which is the same thing. I put the walnut water in with some scale, and I cooked it for about 20 minutes. Now, while the ink is cooking, which will take a while, I will show you how to make a reed pen. Bamboo is native to North America, or at least a bunch of different species of cane is. Whether you've actually got real bamboo or something like bamboo, it all works the same. This was a piece, again, that's growing in the swamp behind the shop. So what I do, I cut a piece, the node at one end, and pass the node on the other. And then I take my pen knife. This is why we have pen knives, for making pens. This will work on a goose quill, a turkey feather, but it works just as well on things like reed and bamboo. And what you want to do is slice down. It's kind of hard to do while trying to keep it in line with the camera. But here I go. And you want to slice it down until you get past all the soft living stuff that was on the inside, and you want to take off the waxy living barky part on the outside, and you want to shave down the sides. And then you thin it out because a nib on a pen needs to be somewhat flexible. So you take little shavings off. And then you can cut a little bit of an angle at the very tip because you want the tip to come down to almost a perfect sort of a knife edge. And then you have to split it. Get it about in the center. And you split it, and that becomes the ink reservoir. That's not the best pen I've ever made, but I have some of the ink that I made from last year's I have some of the ink made from last year's walnut stuff that I made before. And I'm going to put that down on the vise. Boy, this is kind of awkward. Sorry to have to keep moving the camera, but I dip the pen in the ink. The amount of thickness of the ink will give you an idea. Okay, so I cooked that iron oxide scale and walnut juice on the forge for about a half an hour and then let it cool down. And I now have a coffee filter and a jar. And this is still a little warm, but not that warm, so I think it'll be safe. And all I'm going to do is pour off the liquid and filter it to get any last bits or pieces. And there's still a lot of scale left in the bottom, so you could just keep adding more walnut to it. This is nice black ink. It reduced down, the volume of the fluid is maybe an eighth of what I put in there because I kept adding more as it cooked. But you keep it capped, it will keep forever. Back in the day, they used to reduce it all the way down and make solid cakes of ink. And it wasn't uncommon for people to have a little tin can, like a little snuff box or a tinder box. They would have a little cake of solid ink in it. And you would either spit on it or put a couple of drops of water on it and rub it with the nib of the pen, and be able to write without having a liquid bottle of ink in your pocket. So if you needed to carry a pen and ink around, a little cake of solid ink in a tin was the safest way to do that. You see, I get a nice, beautiful blue-black ink here. And that's probably going to take a while to filter through because the filters, well, not clogged, but up to capacity. So anyway, Dan Tokar at the Willow Forge in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. If you want to help me out making more videos like this, I have my Patreon link in the description.